Okay, for this example, what we want is an application that'll play one of 4 different songs now instead of just one song like the one that we had in Chapter 3. So what we're going to do is display 4 images on the application's display window. And if we click on one of those images, then a song corresponding to that image will start playing. If we click on another image, then the one that was playing will stop and the other one will start. If we click someplace outside of any image, then any music that was already playing will stop. Okay? So here's my mock-up of what this application is going to look like. First thing I want to do before we start going into some pseudocode for this is to talk about how we're going to tell if the user's actually clicked on something. So what we're going to do is divide up the application into imaginary areas. So first of all, we're going to have a couple of imaginary lines. They won't be visible when the program runs, but these lines correspond to the top and bottom of this row of images that we've got displayed. So if the user clicks someplace above this line or below this line, then we know right away that they didn't click on any image, and so all we'll do is stop the music from playing. Okay? So we can kind of exclude these areas. Based on them clicking above or below those 2 imaginary lines. Then for each image, we'll also have a pair of lines that correspond to the left and right hand side of each image. Okay, so it's a total of 8 different lines. Again, these are imaginary. They don't show up when we run the program. They're just there for our purposes to think about things. And if I'm in between these 2 lines, the 2 red lines, and also in between these 2 green lines, then that means that this is the image that was selected or clicked upon. And so we run that particular song, play that song. On the other hand, if we were between the 2 red lines and then in between these 2 green lines, that would indicate that the second image was clicked on. And so that would be the song that would play. Likewise, between the 2 red lines and between these 2 green lines, that song would play. And lastly, between these 2 red lines and these 2 green lines, the 4th song would play. Okay? And in a none of the above situation, either outside, above or below the red lines, or not in between any one of these pairs of green lines, that would be the situation where we stop the music from playing and don't play any particular song. Okay? So that shows graphically how we're going to do that. Just to reinforce that idea, let's go to the computer and take a look at an execution of a sort of a mock-up that illustrates that concept.
Okay, what we have here is a little bit of a mock-up that kind of shows the same thing we just drew on the board, but with the actual pictures and layout that we'll use in our application that we end up building. Also, it has those lines drawn. In this case, they're all blue lines instead of red and green, but they still illustrate the different areas where our mouse pointer could be. So right now, my mouse pointer is outside of the red lines, the lines that we had on the board that are above and below the images. And so the background is red. And that means that none of these things are selected. No song would be playing. As soon as I move my mouse pointer down in between those 2 lines that represent the top and bottom of the images, Now it's possible that one of the images was selected, but in this case, since my mouse pointer is not in between the lines for any image, none of them are selected. However, if I move my mouse over one of the images, now I'm between the top and bottom line and the left and right line for this image, so this is the one that's selected. And if I go here, same thing, between the top and the bottom, the left and the right for this image, so now this is the one that's selected. Here, same thing, top, bottom, left, right, or top, bottom, left, right. So ultimately in our application, what we'll do when we detect a mouse click is use a series of if statements in nested if to make sure that we're between the top line and the bottom line. And then if that's true, see if we're in between the left and right for one of the 4 images. Okay, so now let's start to write some pseudocode to see how this might work.
Hey, that's weird. Oh well. Before we do our pseudocode, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the variables that the textbooks talks about that we're going to use for the positions of the pictures on the screen, because they'll be very important in our logic. So first of all, remember, I can't draw, so these are supposed to be square. Just take that for granted. Okay, so we've got several different constants that we're going to use in our logic in the pseudocode. The first one is the distance from the top of the display window to the beginning of an image, and that's image top. Okay, so that just tells us how many pixels down that particular image is. Second one is going to be the dimension of one of these images. And again, pretend that they're square, but that's called image size. And I believe in the application it's 100 by 100 pixels. Okay? Then the last piece is how far over each individual picture is from the left part of the window. So our first image, this distance right here, is x1. For the second image, this distance, x2, and so on. Okay, so the third image, that distance is x3, and finally for the fourth image, that distance is x4. Okay, and with all those different variables, that will allow us to actually make our decision about which one of these was clicked on. So that's the pseudocode that we're going to focus on in the video. You can look at the pseudocode for setup and draw and so on in the textbook, but we're going to focus on mouse clicked. So we'll erase the board and start looking at some pseudocode. Okay, in our mouse clicked method, this is the method that gets called when the user clicks on the mouse button. So what we have to do is determine whether or not that click happened over one of those images. Okay? And then we'll act appropriately by playing the song that was selected. Okay? So our first thing that we're going to do is we're going to assume that the user, actually when they clicked, we're going to just pause whatever was playing and then go from there. So we'll take the current song and pause it. Okay? So as soon as they click, whatever was playing stops. All right. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have a variable that through a series of nested if statements will set to true if they actually clicked on one of the images. So we'll call that a Boolean named artist was chosen. And we'll start out with the assumption that that's false. Okay, so that indicates when someone clicked on one of the images. All right. So from the mock-up that we ran before with the red, yellow, and green areas on the application, we saw that we had to determine if they were below a line and above a line, and if so, it's possible that they clicked on something. So let's start that. That'll be our outer if. So if our mouse y coordinate, remember mouse x and mouse y, is the coordinates where the mouse pointer is. So if that mouse y is greater than or equal to the image top variable, and it's also less than or equal to the bottom of an image, which would be image top plus image size. If that's true, then we can start to check to see if they actually clicked on an image. Okay, so we'll check for the first one first. Now we'll be looking at our mouse x value. And if that mouse x is greater than or equal to the left-hand side of the image and less than or equal to the left side plus image size, that means that the user actually clicked on the first image. And so in that case, what we'll do is we'll set our current song alias variable to the first song, and then we'll say that they actually chose someone. Okay? If that wasn't true, then we're going to check to see if it was true for the second image. Okay? So that would be mouse x greater than or equal to x2, and I'm just going to abbreviate image size there to make that work. If that's true, then we'll set our current song to song 2. And indicate that they actually chose a song. Okay? And then we would do the same thing for artist or song 3 and song 4. They'd be very much like this case, else ifs. Okay? Now, after all of that, so the inner if statements that determine the left-right aspect and the outer if statement that determines the up-down aspect, then what we'll do is test the value of the artist was chosen variable. So if that's true, if they actually clicked on a picture, then we'll play that song. So we'll rewind it first. And then play it. Okay? So that's how we do our decision making in the mouse clicked method. Pause whatever was playing, assume that nothing was chosen. If they're in the right up and down area, then we'll choose left or check left and right for all 4 of the images. If any of those is true, select the song, update our artist was chosen flag. Then outside of all of those if statements, check to see if the artist was chosen, and if so, rewind the song and play it. Note that if they click someplace not on any one of the images, then this artist was chosen flag will be false after this if statement. So the effect is that not clicking on an image pauses whatever was playing. Okay. Again, you can look in the textbook for the pseudocode for draw and setup, but this is how mouse clicked would work. So let's go ahead and implement that.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the mouse clicked method in this implementation. All the other code has already been written. I've already added my images and my songs to the application. So once we do the mouse clicked method, we should actually be able to run things and have it work. And in fact, if we run it right now, be patient while it starts. It should actually start and display the images. It just doesn't do anything on mouse clicked because we haven't written that method yet. So that's what we're going to take care of. All right, so we're going to follow the pseudocode that we just developed. So inside our mouse clicked method, the first thing we're going to do is stop the song that's playing right now. So we'll do a pause on the current song variable, which is our alias variable, reference variable that refers to whichever song was playing right now. And then we have a flag variable that's going to tell us which of the pictures was clicked on, if any. That's a Boolean. And we'll set that to false. Okay? And then at the end, what we'll do is we'll check the value of that flag. And we'll play it if they actually clicked on one of the images. So if artist was chosen, if that's true, then what we'll do is rewind the current song and play it. Okay? Now what goes in the middle then, in between that, is the nested if structure that tells us if we actually clicked on one of the images to begin with. Okay? So, what we're going to check first is whether we're in the correct vertical range. That is, if we're up and down in the actual area where we could have, conceivably, clicked on an image. So that's based on our mouse y variable. If it's greater than or equal to, then our image top value, and less than or equal to the coordinate of the bottom of the images, then we can start paying attention to the stuff left and right. Okay? If we're not in the correct vertical range, then we'll skip over this entire body and not even worry about checking left and right, and then proceed down to here. Okay? All right, so now we'll check to see if we're over one of the images. And we'll do that with a chained if statement. So if the mouse x is greater than or equal to x1 and mouse x is less than or equal to x1 plus image size, that means that song 1 was chosen. So we'll update our alias variable and our flag variable. Okay? And then what we have to do is just repeat that for all of the other images. And we'll do those with chained ifs. Okay? And I'm going to take advantage of some cut and paste here. So now we're going to be looking at image 2 instead of image 1, or x2 instead of x1. Okay. And so in that case, that's song 2. And again, we'll take advantage of copy and paste a little bit. We'll set that to song 2, and the artist was chosen equals true again. Okay? Now we can repeat that 2 more times, and all we'll have to do is update the number. So here's song 3. And song 4. And the end of this if is where we stop doing our left and right checking. Okay? So again, following the logic, are we vertically in the correct range? And then are we in one of the horizontal areas for image 1, 2, 3, or 4? Those are the decisions that we make with this if statement. Okay? Now let's run it and see what happens. All right, good. It still shows up, so we don't have any syntax errors. That's always a good place to start. If I click outside of one of the images, nothing happens. But if I click on one of the images, then I get some music. If I click on another image, different song,
All right.
different song, different song, and clicking outside stops it. So there we go. That's our 4-song player that uses nested and chained ifs for the decision making.